Okay, so this is the third of 3 videos about solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So I'm going to go through a few examples. And at the start, I'll just do parts of a few so you get to see the sort of important ideas that are new here. Okay, so here's an example of an equation we might need to solve. X squared plus 6x minus 7 equals 0. If you wanted to solve this by completing the square, the first thing you'd do is complete the square and change it into standard form. Now I'm going to tell you just for now, if you want to, you can pause the video and go through it and check. But I'm going to tell you that this is equal to x plus 3 squared minus 16 equals 0. Okay, so I'll show you how to, maybe we'll put a dot 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 here. I'll show you how to get from this point to the end, because we've already talked in other videos about how to get up to this point. Okay, so what we're going to do is isolate x plus 3 squared. I'm going to isolate this part here. And then we're going to, once we've got that isolated, we'll take the square root of both sides. And there's something we'll have to talk about signs there. And then after we do that, we'll subtract 3 from both sides to get rid of the plus 3. Okay, so first of all, we'll add 16 to both sides. So we'll have x plus 3 squared equals 16. And at this point, this is when I want to take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square sign. But the thing is here is that if we take the square root, this is going to be either plus or minus the square root of 16. And maybe I'll talk about that in a bit after, but I'll keep going from there. So what that means is root 16 is 4. But this right side here could be either plus 4 or it could be minus 4. So now we have x plus 3 equals plus or minus 4. Okay, and then I'll put some of these just up a little here. So there's 2 cases at this point. We could have x plus 3 equals 4, so that's the positive side. Or the other option is x plus 3 equals negative 4. We had those 2 cases starting on this line here. Just to save space though, I just wrote it with the plus or minus instead of breaking it up into 2 options right away. So if x plus 3 equals 4, we'll subtract 3 from both sides. Here we get x equals 1. And then over here on the other side, if we have x plus 3 equals negative 4, again we'll subtract 3. We have x equals negative 7. So these, we have 2 answers to this equation, as we've seen in a lot of equations, a lot of quadratic equations. So if we wanted to sort of check our work here, we could substitute x equals 1 or x equals negative 7 back into the original equation up here. We can just do that just thinking about it, or you could write it down. If we substitute x equals 1, we'd have 1 squared plus 6 times 1. So that's 1 plus 6 is 7 minus 7. And that really is 0. So this one is right. And then if we substitute x equals negative 7, our x squared is 49. And then 6x is negative 42. So x squared plus 6x is 7. Minus 7 is 0. So that's right as well. Okay, so what we did here again, we're looking at how to solve quadratics by completing the square, except that I didn't complete the square. Here's the quadratic in general form. And then you saw in the other videos how to switch that to standard form. And then what we do first is we isolate the x plus 3 squared, or whatever that term in the brackets happens to be. And then we'll take the square root of both sides, and we have to have plus or minus on this side here. And then you look at the 2 cases, we can take the square root right here, and then we look at the 2 cases separately. So we have x plus 3 is plus 4 over here, and x plus 3 is minus 4 over here. And those will give you the 2 answers. Okay, just before I go on, I'll just look at what the story is with this plus or minus. suppose, for example, that we had x squared equals 25. If I asked you what x is, probably lots of people would say 5. And that's true. That really is one value of x that was the solution to this equation here. But the thing is, it's not the only value of x. Because negative 5 squared is also equal to 25. So when we have an equation that with a, say, an x squared or something similar, if we're square rooting both sides, we have to consider the positive version and the negative version of the square roots. So we could have x equals 5, and the other option is x equals negative 5. Okay? So that's all we did back over here, is we just have to consider the plus root 16 and also minus root 16. Okay, so here's another example. We've got a quadratic equation here, and this one's already been written in standard form. I'll just go through how to solve it. It's very similar to the last one. Really the main difference here is just that we've got this extra a value here of 3, where before we only had 1 x squared. So, we'll start off the same way. First of all, we'll get rid of the minus 12. And the way we'll do that is we'll add 12 to both sides. So that will give us 3 times x minus 2 squared. And then the plus 12 minus 12 plus 12 is 0. Equals, and 0 plus 12 is 12. Okay, now we've got to get rid of that 3. So we'll divide both sides by 3. So we'll have x minus 2 squared equals 4. Okay, so we've got to take the square root of both sides now, and we have to remember about the plus and minus thing. So we'll have x minus 2 squared equals 4, and now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That's useful because squaring and square rooting are opposites, so that'll undo that over here. Now I've got to put that plus or minus in here, and this is going to leave me with x minus 2, just x minus 2, equals plus or minus, and then the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, and now look, I'll look at the two cases. So first of all, we might have x minus 2 equals 2. That's the positive version, the plus of the plus or minus. And the other option is x minus 2 equals negative 2. Okay, so in both cases we're going to add 2 to both sides to get rid of the minus 2 from x minus 2. And over here on the left we'll have x equals 4. And then on the right hand side, if when we add 2, we have x equals 0. And so these two solutions here, x equals 4 and x equals 0, those are our final solutions. So just to confirm this, you should just pause the video for a second. Substitute x equals 4 back in up here for x, and then make sure that that does really come out to 0. And then after that, substitute x equals 0 for x, and make sure that comes out to 0 as well. Okay, so just to sum up, if we have to solve a quadratic equation, if we want to do it by completing the square, the first thing to do is to complete the square, to write the equation in standard form. So that's where we started off with this one. If you have trouble with that, then you'll have to go back to the last two videos to watch. So once we've got it in standard form, then we want to get this constant term over on the other side of the equal sign. by just adding or subtracting the opposite of what we've got here. So that was where we added the 12. And then we want to divide by this coefficient here. So you just have what's in brackets. Something with an x in it squared equals something else. So that's what we've got in this step here. And then at that point, we can take the square root of both sides. Because at that point, all we have on the left-hand side is something squared. So if we take the square root, that'll get rid of the squared. When we do that, you got to remember this plus or minus here. So we'll have the x, in this case, x minus 2 equals plus or minus 2. And then once you've got that line written, split it into two parts here. The plus part, here where it's x plus 2 is just 2. And then over here, x plus 2 is minus 2. And then you've just got two linear equations to solve there. And you will usually have two solutions. Alright, thanks.